Okay, this week we're back on the countryside where I get to use my favourite machine, my smoker. But instead of smoking up some meat, we're going to smoke up some quark and make Kasnudel. We've made Kasnudel on the channel before, but this is going to be a little different feeling. Kasnudel is a noodle dumpling. So to start this recipe, we're going to head back to yesterday. Okay, to start, we need to get the Topfen ready. Now I'm going to be smoking the Topfen, and you need this, it's called Brussels Topfen, which is only called Topfen in Austria. Everywhere else in the world, it's called quark. So yeah, just get it in, break it all up in your container, and then we'll go down to the smoker and get it smoked. Okay, as you can see, got my Topfen divided into two containers here. Now I've just put them in my smoker. I haven't turned it on yet because I want to get the full amount of smoke that comes out of it. So I'm just going to turn my smoker on the lowest setting, wait for it to start, and then we'll get the lid closed. As you can see, the smoke's just starting to roll. Now I know from past experience that this is the coldest part on the bottom shelf of this smoker. So I've moved that one all the way to the side, and I've just put in the thermometer just to have a better eye on the temperature, so I don't, so it doesn't start melting or burning. But I'm going to get the lid closed now, so I capture all this smoke, and then we'll come back in 10-15 minutes just to check it, maybe give it a mix around, make sure nothing's burning or starting to melt. We've had it on for about 20 minutes so far. Just go and open it up, have a little look around, make sure nothing's melting or sticking to the bottom of a pan, but I can actually feel the cheese is still quite cold, so we're just going to close it up and let it keep doing its thing. Alrighty, the next thing we have to crack on with is the dough. Now, because I'm not at home, I'm going to have to improvise with my tools that I usually have. So instead of a bench scraper, I'm going to use this spatula. And also this awesome apron with a lobster on the front. Okay, I'm also making a lot more than what the ingredients will be on the website where this will all be, because I'm going to make around 40 Kasnudel in total. If you want to make this many, you just scale it up. It's exactly the same measurements, just scale it up. Otherwise, we'll have the individual portion sizes labelled on the website. So I'm just going to bung my eggs in the middle, start with a fork, and start slowly incorporating it little bit by little bit. Okay, as soon as this comes too much for that, I've got my water here, and we're just going to start mixing that in as well. It's very similar to making the just egg pasta dough, just a lot less eggs and more water. I almost nearly forgot. We're going to need to add some salt too, so should have mixed that in with the dough, but give it a good sprinkle over the top. You should have mixed that in with the dry dough at the start and then started doing this, but it's going to be fine. So just keep working it with the fork around the place as you would with a normal pasta dough, adding the water a little bit by little bit. As you can see, the water won't be an exact thing. It'll depend on how big your eggs were and what type of flour you're going to be using. So at the start, I won't be adding all of it, but I'm going to reserve a little bit, and I'll add more as needed once I start kneading this with my hands. So I've got about as much liquid in there as I wanted to have at the moment until I start to bring all this dough together. It's looking good at the moment, so we'll clean this fork off, and then we'll start getting in there with our hands. Even though it's not completely together, I can already tell that I'm going to need a little bit more water. So I'll just bung a bit on there, scoop up some of the dry flour from the outside, put it right on the water, I'll keep on bringing it together. Alternatively, you could use a kitchen machine for this, like a stand mixer, but we don't have one of those here. So I'm going to have to do it the old-fashioned way. And I haven't mixed dough by hand for a long time, so it's good to keep up the practice. I like it. It's very therapeutic. Just keep adding water as needed. If you think you need a little bit, just add some. Just be careful not to add too much, because with pasta you can add liquid, but you can't take it away. The only way you can fix that is if you add more flour, which, I guess you could, but then you're going to end up with an enormous amount of pasta. Enormous amount of dough, I should say. After a good 10 minutes of kneading, your dough should look a little something like that. Now it's just about ready. It needs one more little knead, and then we'll carry on with the next step. Okay, after that final knead from my good assistant there, we're just going to bring it into a nice little bowl. Doesn't have to be a bowl. All right, so now we're going to get another bowl, and we're just going to put a bit of olive oil in it. Probably a little bit too much. All right, olive oil in it, then we'll get this all coated in the oil as well. Okay, once you got it in your bowl, you just want to get some cling film, cover it up. And now you want to let this rest for at least an hour. Okay, I just pulled my top fin out of the smoker. It was on there for about 2.5 hours. Every now and again, I went back there, just gave it a nice little mix around like this to make sure it got nice and evenly smoked all the way through. And now I'm just going to set this aside for a moment while we get the other things ready for the filling, and then we'll come back and we'll get the filling put together. Okay, for the filling, I've just got a little bit of butter in the pan. Just going to add a little bit of olive oil to it. Then once that's all melted down and nice and warm, we'll add the 3 different types of sage. Okay, we've got the 3 different types of sage. I'm not sure what they're named of, but I'll find out and we'll get the names of them and we'll put them up on the screen. Once your pan and your butter's nice and hot, go ahead and add the sage. We'll give these a little mix around and we'll just get them fried off there real quick. Just to take that bitterness away and that rawness out of the sage before we add it to the filling. Sage doesn't take long. It's just been in here for about a minute, minute and a half, just to take that raw bitterness taste out of the sage. So we'll get this moved up to the chopping board and then we'll chop it up and get the filling started. As you see, I got the sage all turned out onto the chopping board here. And I'm just going to go through and get it all nicely, finely chopped up. As you see, I got it all chopped up and put on this little plate. How much you use of this is entirely up to you, but I'm using, that's about 25 grams after it was cooked and chopped up. I've already pre-weighed out my breadcrumbs that I need, and for this amount, I'm going to be using 300 grams of these dried breadcrumbs. I used to use fresh, but I had these ones lying around, so I'm going to use these ones. Now I'm going to add all of my top fin into the breadcrumb, and the herbs, we'll put them in. And then, just because it's here, I got the little bit of oil that was left over from frying off the herbs. We'll tip that in for a little bit extra flavour. And then we'll add some salt. Now we'll give this a mix up. Now I also know that I'm going to have to add some milk to this mixture because I'm using dried breadcrumbs. So we'll get this kind of getting mixed up and then we'll check the consistency after we get it all mixed through, and then we'll see if we need to add any milk. But I'm pretty sure we're going to have to add a little bit. Okay, I'm mixing the mixture up and it feels a little bit dry to me, so I'm going to get about 100 mils of milk and we'll pour that in. Okay, and we'll keep on mixing it in. Once you get it all mixed up, you just want to go ahead and give it a little taste. It's got a big smoke flavour to it, which is really nice, but it needs a little bit more salt. So what I'm going to do is I'll add a little bit more salt, mix that through, and then we'll carry on with the next step. Alright, after a little bit more consideration, I decided to add another 25 grams of fresh sage to this, to really amp up that saginess. So we'll go ahead and dump that in. Also, I'm going to add some more salt in it again because it needs a little bit more. Alright, now we'll mix this in and then we'll start forming the balls. Alright, and as always, after you mix it in, we'll give that a taste test. It's still not full sagey, but it'll be alright. Time to start making balls. Now to make the next bit go easy, we're going to form all these into little bowls. So with damp hands, you just want to get some of your mixture. I'm going to make mine 50 grams each. Just go ahead, roll it in your hands till you get roughly a little ball, and then we're going to carry on, roll all of this into balls. Alright, as you can see, I've got them all rolled into balls.
Oh, wow.
Now we're going to roll out the dough, and we'll make them into Kasnudeln. To roll it out, you just want to grab some of your dough, keep the rest of it under cling film so it doesn't dry out. I've got some extra flour on the side here, so we just want to sprinkle a little bit down and start rolling it out. Now what I like to do is keep one side a little bit more sticky than the other. So the floured side I would keep up so it doesn't stick to your rolling pin. And then I wouldn't put much more flour on the underside. And that'll keep it stuck to the board and it'll be easy to roll it into a long rectangle. So you just want to go ahead and roll it out into a nice long rectangle. Once you've rolled it out till it's nice and thin, you want to get your balls you just made up. Now, if you're not too confident in this, I wouldn't put as many on at the start. So we'll just go for 3 at the start, but usually I'll get about 4 on here. But I haven't done this for a while, so we'll just spread these out nice and evenly. And you just want to grab your dough, fold it over, and then as you get it, you just want to push down with your hands around it, and then pull back a little bit so it creates a nice tight seal. And you just want to push down and pull back, and it creates a nice little tight seal around it. So you go ahead and get all 3 of your balls in here, a nice seal, and then I just like to push along the front of it so it seals it up properly. Try not to get any air trapped in there if you can, or as best you can. If you do, just try and get it out. Okay, now if you don't have one of these little cutters like that, a pizza cutter would also work, or you could use a knife. But we've got this, so we'll use that. And you want to get a nice cut around there. Then you got a nice little Kasnudel. Now you could leave it like this, or you could cut another one, and you could make a nice little plait around there. But I have no idea how to do this, so my father-in-law, he's going to show you how to do it.
You take it and then press, roll, press, fold, In a few seconds the noodle is ready.
Okay, the other advantage of doing it like this is it actually pulls the dough a little bit tighter and less air bubbles around than if you do it like this. But either way will work just fine. So we're going to go ahead and roll the rest of them out and form the rest of them, and then we'll come back. Okay, I've got my canoodle already rundled up, and my water's just about at a boil. And I'm going to put them in, and we're going to blanch them off for 5 minutes. Now, if you're going to eat these right away, you would cook them for at least 10 to 12 minutes, and then they'll be cooked all the way through. But because we're going to be eating these tomorrow, I'm just going to blanch them off for 5 minutes now, and then I'll let them cool down completely on a rack, and then I'll store them in the fridge overnight, and then I'll finish off cooking them tomorrow. Okay, after they've been blanched off for 5 minutes, just with your slotted spoon, just go ahead, scoop them out, and place them on a board. Then we'll let them cool down, and set them in the fridge. With the Kasnudeln, traditionally they would use pork, it's called Grammeln in Austria, but it's essentially pork fat that they cook down, and these little bits of fat turn nice and crispy, or they usually use butter. But considering I had all this beef fat laying around, I'm going to be doing that. So I've just got a whole bunch of beef fat in my tray here, and I've cut it up into small little cubes, some of them are a little bit bigger. It doesn't matter how big they are. Just cut them up, put them in a tray. Now I'm going to cover this with some elf oil. It doesn't have to be, tightly sealed. It's just to stop it splattering, because I'm going to put this in the oven at around 120, 130 degrees, and I'm going to let this render down. And the elf oil will just help it stop if it starts to, if it gets a little bit too hot. It'll stop it splattering all over your oven. So we'll put that in the oven. Now, if you're using as much as I am, you want to keep an eye on it, because as it renders down, you want to, drain it off. All you got to do is just tip it off through a strainer and have a little bowl underneath and catch all that lard. Because once this is finished, you'll have perfect beef tallow. So I'll stick this in the oven. It should take, anywhere from an hour to 2 hours to get nice and crispy. But once it's finished, we'll come back and I'll show you the finished result. The Grammeln, actually I had to keep on around 200. And then this is more fat than I originally showed in the picture. As you can see, the end result. Now the fat here is a little bit chunky for what we need, but I'm going to let it cool down and it'll actually crispen up a little more than it already is. And then I'll cut it up into smaller pieces, and then we'll fry it off again in the pan with some of the fat before we serve. And get it even extra crispier and a little bit smaller for the Kasnudeln. So I've just got some of the beef tallow heating up on the pan, and I've already gone through and roughly chopped up all of the Grammeln into a little bit smaller pieces. So once we get some heat in the fat, we'll put a couple of handfuls in, and then we'll get them all crispened up. As you can see, I've got my oil nice and hot. I'm going to add a couple of handfuls of the Grammeln, of the fat, and then we'll just move this around and get it all nice and crispy. And make sure you keep it moving around so nothing burns. And it shouldn't take too long before it gets all nice and crispy. Once your fat's all nice and puffed up a little bit, looking like that, you just want to transfer it to a plate with some paper towel, and we'll let it cool. So I've just got a pot of water here coming up to a boil. I'm just going to put some salt in it. We'll wait until it comes up to a boil. Alrighty, I got my water to just to a simmer there. Now I'm going to put my Kasnudeln in. I'm going to cook these for around 10 minutes. Make sure the water doesn't boil too rapidly or violently. Just keep it at a simmer, and 10 minutes, they'll be done. Now this is purely for plating up, but you could get some sage leaves and just toast them off quickly in your beef tallow that you cooked your Grammeln in. This takes literally 30 seconds after they hit the fat. Alright, and once you hear your timer going off, you take them out and you'll be ready to plate. Alternatively, with the Kasnudeln, you could brown some butter and use that. But I wanted to go full beef fat today, so that's what I did. Let's see how this turns out. Make sure you get some of that Grammeln and sage in there. Need another bite just to make sure. I wasn't a big fan of the Kasnudeln before, but I can seriously get behind this one. I'm definitely going to be smoking my top from here on out.